Hey there, and welcome to the Totally Fierce Crochet channel. My name's Thomas, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make these awesome fingerless mittens in the Santa version. So as part of our Battle of the Stitches, I created these super beautiful fingerless mittens with our beautiful rocking stitch. They are super fast and super easy to make, and the best part, you can make them in one go from start to finish and directly onto your hands. Of course you can make them in any color, of course also in one solid color, but since 'tis the season, I decided to create a Santa version. And I'm sure Santa needs warm hands as well. So are you ready? 3, 2, 1. Ho ho ho. Let's make some fabulous mittens. Okay, so now I will show you how to make these super beautiful fingerless mittens with our rocking stitch. And the best part, as I mentioned in the intro, they are made in one piece, so you can make them from start to finish in one go. And for this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make the Santa version with the white along the wrist and the red for the hand. Of course, you can make the same tutorial with just one color, like you see it here, or also how I made it for the Battle of the Stitches. So the yarn that I'm going to use for the Santa version is pretty much basic acrylic, just like it says, basic soft acrylic. It's not a super expensive yarn, I know that, but it definitely works well for this kind of a project. It's a DK weight yarn. Again, feel free to choose the color. Of course, I'm using this Christmas red for it. For the white, I'm using Rico Baby, and even though it says Classic DK, it's a little bit thinner than the red one, but that's all okay. Here they say I would need a hook size 3.5 to 4 millimeters, and here they recommend 4 millimeters. Actually, I'm going to use a 4.5 millimeter hook, mainly because I feel like with our rocking stitch, it's always good to go like half a hook size or one hook size up, so that it is not that stiff in the end, because this is quite a dense stitch overall. But feel free to use a 5 millimeter hook or a 4 millimeter hook, really also depending on what kind of yarn you're going to use. Then of course a yarn needle for the end of the project, some scissors, but of course the most important thing for this tutorial is actually going to be your own hand. Luckily, we all carry a pair of them with us, or most of us at least, and your hand determines the size for your mittens, because my goal was to have mittens that really fit. I have seen so many tutorials out there, and they are all either ill-fitting or not very practical, so I really wanted to make a mitten that actually fits. So throughout this tutorial, your hand will be the guide on the size of your mitten. And as you can see here, when I put my hand over one of my mittens, you just see a little bit of the mitten on the sides and up here. And when it is like that, you always know that your mittens will fit. And the white part is then always the wrist part, and the upper part here is for the hand. So in my case, the wrist part is 12 stitches. So feel free, if you want to have this part longer or want to wrap it around one time, just make it like you want to. Just remember the wrist basically ends here, where then the thumb comes out. So this is then our transition part here. And my upper part, usually you have like all the fingers coming out a little bit. So this part here in my case is 25 stitches. So since we are going to start with an I-cord, we have an uneven number of stitches, just like we had it for all the other rocking stitch tutorials. If you prefer to go with the chain method to start your project, then just make sure to add an additional chain element in the end so you can easily turn your work. But for me, it's 12 for the wrist and 25 for the hand. But again, if your hand is probably smaller than mine, just make sure that you adapt the stitch count to your hand. And of course, throughout this tutorial, you can always check it and see how long the piece gets. And we are good to go. We are going to start with the white. We always start in the bottom and then work our way up and then like go up and down in our project. I will start with the white. And again, I will be starting with an I-cord. Trust me, I even tried to make the mittens starting with a chain, and it was a big mess. I'm so used to the I-cord method that I completely forgot how to do a chain in the beginning of a project, and I still think that it's way too fiddly and not stable enough for the first round of full stitches. So I'm going with the I-cord. So I leave a longer tail right here and start with a slip knot first to start my I-cord. And again, you take the end yarn and wrap it around from the front, and you take the yarn that goes to your yarn ball, wrap it around from the back, and then pull that last loop through. And here you have your first I-cord element. And we now do this for 11 times. So we get an I-cord of 11. 2, 3, 4, so here we go. 11 I-cord stitches. And now you might wonder, wasn't he just saying that we need 12 I-cord stitches in the beginning? That's true. If you are going to make your mittens in one solid color, then the transition stitch is definitely number 12. Ours will be number 12 too, but we are going to finish the 12th I-cord stitch with the red color. And for the two-colored version, this goes as follows. So we do as if we would make a 12th I-cord stitch, and then we just hold it with the 3 loops on our hook. And then we take the red and again leave a longer tail, and we are just going to wrap it around. And now we are going to push the upper 2 loops, the red and the first white one here, through the 2 white loops on our hook, just like this. So now we have the red connected. Now we are going to release the hook and then just take the white loop and we are just going to pull it out so we don't lose it when we now continue with the red. And once we have that, we can then easily continue with the red and start our 25 red I-cord stitches. If you are doing the solid colored version, you just continue and make 12 plus 25, which is 37 stitches. And as a little helper to always remember where the transition stitch, the stitch number 12 is, I would recommend you to use a stitch marker and place it right there in the 12th stitch. You don't have to do it with the two colored version because of the colors, because of the different colors, you always know where the transition is. If you do the solid version, it's definitely a little helper to know when to go later on from the rocking stitch to the single crochet part. But now let's just finish the 25 I-cord stitches, and I'll meet you when I'm at the end of this very first space round. So here we go, 25 red stitches and 12 white stitches, and we can directly continue with our first real round, and we turn our work. Again, with the I-cord method, you don't have to have an additional chain to turn and then go into the second chain from the hook. With the I-cord, you can go directly into the first stitch that you see, yarn over, pull the yarn through, and go to the next stitch, yarn over, and pull it through. 3 loops on your hook, like we always had it for the rocking stitch. The beginning and the end are always the 3 loops on your hook. In between we have 4. So now here are the 3. Yarn over, pull it through all 3 of the loops, and chain 1 to close our first shell. And then we go back into the same stitch, then into the next, always yarning over and pulling the yarn through. And we do this until we have 4 loops on our hook, yarn over and pull through all 4 of them, and chain 1 to close it. And I will meet you once there is just 1 more stitch left, and then I'll show you how to transition to the white part. So here we are. This is how it looks like, and now I just have 1 red stitch left, and that means I'm at the end, and I do as if it was the real end of the project, like we had it for the other rocking stitch tutorials. I'm going back into the same stitch where we were, and then pull the yarn through the next one until I have 3 loops on my hook. Then I yarn over, and instead of closing this last shell with my red yarn, I'm going to pull the red yarn to the front, and then I'm going to take my white loop that I pulled out on our way along, just like this. And with that white loop, I'm going to close the shell and basically make the slip stitch or the chain 1, but finishing it with the white. So I have already transitioned. If, of course, you're doing the solid version, you just finish your last shell like you did it before with the 3 loops, and then continue in the next stitch, which is then the one with the stitch marker in there, and then you can continue. And I will now take the stitch marker out, and now I will go into the next stitches with single crochets. And for this very first round only, I'm going under both of the loops. For all the upcoming rounds, I'm going to use just the back loops. I feel like it's a bit nicer to work with when the first round is underneath both of the loops, and I will just make single crochets. If your loop here was a little bit too big, you can still adjust it by pulling on the red yarn a little bit, and we can then go along the way and just make single crochets. You can also make the wrist part a little bit tighter if you want to. If you prefer a tighter wrist part, then I would recommend you to use a smaller hook size just for the wrist part, but that is absolutely optional, and that's also why I just continue with the same hook. And we go all the way. And here we go. So this was our very first round. So far, so good. Now we are going to turn. And again, you don't have to chain one. I know years and years before, people have told us to always chain one when we turn, but you don't need it, and it even makes a much nicer border. So we go back into the stitch, but this time and from now on we always go in the back loop only and make a single crochet, and then we do this 11 more times. And when we are at that very last one, right here, we are going to pull the white loop in front, and we are going to finish this last single crochet with the red. So we then transitioned back to red to continue with our next stitches. And by pulling the loop that we don't use for the rest of the round to the front, we then always have it on the right side when we turn. This is why I do it like this. And now we are back to red, and the beginning, whenever we start then with the red, is a little bit different than we had it before, because now we are not doing a rocking stitch shell with 3 loops. We are actually going to make one with 4 loops, and we always try to go in here. It's not really the chain stitch, it goes like a little bit lower, and we go in there and grab the yarn and pull it through, then go into the next stitch, and here's a chain stitch from the previous round, so we know that this is the end for our next shell. And now we have the 4 loops. The reason for this first one here is that it closes the gap that gets created when we finish the background basically with a regular finish shell of the rocking stitch. So always make sure to take that one up here as well, and this will reduce any holes a lot. And then yarn over, pull it through, and chain one to close it. And from there we can then just continue with our rocking stitch with the regular shells with 4 loops all the way. And the last one in this round is then going to be 3 loops again, and this is where I'll meet you. So our last shell of 4, like this, and the border stitch is going to be 3 loops, just like that, and chain 1, and we turn, and from there we continue as always with the rocking stitch, 3 loops, and chain 1 to close it, and we can go back down. Now with only 37 stitches, the rounds go quite fast, so you will have your mittens done in no time. And here we go. 1 red stitch left, so we have our 3 loops, and then pull the yarn through, take the red yarn to the front, and grab the white, pull it over your hook, and pull it through. You can always drag on it to bring it down, and of course you can use the red yarn a little bit to push it down as well. And then we go from there with the white in the back loop of our first single crochet and make back loop single crochets all the way through. Now I know you probably have seen it with working with 2 colored yarns always can be a bit tricky with like the 2 yarn skeins next to each other, so always make sure that if it gets tangled up, just untangle it quickly, and otherwise it can be really messy, so always watch out for where the yarn is. And when I'm at the end here, I will show you another little trick. And here's my 11th. Just to be sure, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Exactly. So usually the last stitch is like somewhere down here, a bit hidden, and it's always a bit hard to get, but there's a much simpler solution, and this is this like loop here that goes around the border, and this was mainly because we didn't chain in the previous round before turning, and for this 12th stitch we can always use this outer loop right here, yarn over, pull the yarn through like a regular single crochet, 2 loops, yarn over and pull through 2, and you get like a pretty perfect border on the side. So no need to chain, no need to search for that little last 12th stitch here, just use the one on the outside and you can turn and you're good to go with the next round. And again, in the back loops only single crochets. I will now show you one last time the transition to red, and then you are good to go until you have basically the size of your hand without the big thumb. And then I will show you how to add the thumb part, which goes super easy, surprisingly easy, but it works. So, but first we make this white part here. So again, our last stitch in the back loop, we are not finishing it, then we take the white yarn. In that case, I will just take my yarn ball and put it to the front as well. And then we take the red yarn and finish that last single crochet with the red before we can then continue with our stitches. And the first one then goes right in here, and then the second in the next stitch, and in the fourth, which then completes our first full shell with 4 loops. And this is how the transition then looks like. And so we continue our mittens right until we have the size like this part here without the thumb. And I'll meet you when I'm there. Make sure to have this round finished then for the white, because when we go up we will then start creating the thumb. So see you soon. Welcome back. So now I have basically the size of my hand for my mittens except for the thumb, and this is what we are going to handle next. To add the thumb, we will just go along until we basically reach the part where we want the thumb to go out or the thumb to sit. In my case, I know that this is going to be after the 8th rocking stitch shell on the side, so make sure to check it out and always reassure it where your thumb then comes out. So I will go along and meet you at the stitch where I will then add the thumb to it. So here we go. I made 8 stitches, and when I now place my hand, you will see I'm right here. So this space here in between the where I am right now and my finger then is basically where then I will start the thumb. And it's just important that we always start the thumb at the end of one shell. So we always then, when we go back and then also when we continue with the longer side, we can keep up with our rocking stitch pattern. And now what we're going to do to add the thumb right here, this part, we are going to make 5 foundation single crochets. It sounds more complicated than it is, but we go back into our last stitch right here, pull the yarn through like this, and then we yarn over, and then we just go through one of the loops, and then we yarn over and go through the last 2 of the loops. And this was the first foundation single crochet. Then we turn our work until we see that bottom stitch right here, both loops, and then we yarn over and pull the yarn through, and then again we do the same thing. We yarn over and pull through just one, and then we yarn over and pull through 2 loops. I'll show it again. We go in the bottom loop or in the bottom stitch, pull the yarn through, yarn over, pull through 1, and yarn over and pull through 2 loops. Now we had 3. Now let's make a 4th one. So in the bottom stitch, yarn over, pull it through 1, and then pull it through 2. And now we need one more, the final one. So we take the bottom stitch, pull it through, yarn over, pull through 1, and yarn over and pull through 2, and just like that we created the first part of our thumb. And now we turn as if we were up here, because now we can then just continue with our rocking stitch, and the end of our thumb is the same like the end of our mitten. So we start by going into the first stitch, pulling the yarn through, then we go into the next stitch, pull the yarn through, 3 loops as always, and pull through all 3 of them and close the shell, and then we can just continue with our rocking stitch until we have 4 loops on our hook, pull through all 4 of them and chain 1 to close it, and we continue like that. And here we then end up in that last chain element from our 8th rocking shell. So we are now back on track on our regular part and can then just continue all the way till we then transition to white. And this we do for as long as it has to be to cover our thumb. And I think it's 8 rounds or something like this to cover my thumb. So just make sure to always track your work and the size of your hand. And I will meet you once I have done the thumb part, and then I will show you how to close it and connect it back again to our full mitten part. And until then, have fun, and I'll see you later. So now I reached the size for the thumb. You can try it. If it then almost closes, the size is correct, and in the end it will always stretch a little bit. So I will go up right until I'm here, and then we can close the thumb. So here we are, our thumb is done. And now you take your mitten and turn it, and we are just going to align those 2 parts together. Remember, here we started with a foundation round of 5, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and now we are going back into that last foundation stitch right here and bring the hook in, and then we go into our last stitch here on the other side, yarn over, pull the yarn through like this, and simply slip stitch, and then we go into the next stitch on the one side and then on the other side, slip stitch. Here's the next one. Just right until we arrive at the same spot where we were, where we then also started our very first. This was it. And now we go back into our last stitch here, where we then also started our foundation stitches. We go back in here, grab the yarn, pull it through, then go into the next stitch and into the next after that, because now we can then just continue with a regular rocking shell to connect our thumb directly to our piece and finish the round as if it would have been a normal round. Here we go. And now again we turn, and as you can see, it already aligns perfectly. So we can just go back like we did it before. Of course, it can be a little bit fiddly now with the full thumb part, but it will get easier in the upcoming rounds. Let's see, there's one more. Before we then connect it right back into the same stitch. So in that stitch where we placed the foundation stitches, we reconnect it, and then of course we go downwards and use it again, and for a fourth time, all in the same stitch, we can then move along making our rocking stitches. How absolutely amazing is this? I mean, I had a few trials before I figured this one out, but once I had it, I couldn't believe it. So let's go down, and once I'm at the end, I will show you what we just did, just in case it was too fast. So always go back if you want to see special parts like this again. And in here, the red to the front and the white back up, pull the white tight, then the red, and continue with single crochets in the back loop. And here we go. So what we did, we basically closed our thumb, which is of course awesome, and we also reconnected our piece to the long part here, and as you can see, we can then just go along until we basically have the same side length like we had it here. And this is actually the next thing to do for us. So go along until you almost have the exact same size like you had it in the beginning, and make sure to stop your work up here and not down there, because we are going to close it, of course, where we started it. So it's really a project in one go, and I will meet you once I made this part here, and then I'm up here to show you how to finish it off. So now I am at the end up here. I am of course trying how the mitten will be and if it will be closable, and I think that this should be okay. As I mentioned before, it's okay to leave it a little bit, or to have it a little bit tighter, because of course the fabric will then at some point stretch out a little bit. And now we can start crocheting the sides together, and we are doing it the exact same way like we did it before with the thumb. I go in that first stitch right here, and then in the last stitch on the other side, and I will just pull through and make slip stitches, just one stitch after the other, to close my mittens. And once you have reached the transition point, make sure to make the last slip stitch with the white color. And then continue from there. All the way through with slip stitches. Of course, you can also sew this part together, and that would leave you with a more flat seam on the side, but I think that having it in one go really should mean that no cutting in between, and then finishing it like this once we have our last stitches here. We can then cut both yarns and just weave the ends in, and we're done. So really from start to finish in one go, which I absolutely love. And here we go. One last chain. Then we can cut the white, pull the yarn through, and we can also cut the red, because now the only thing we have to do is to sew in the yarn ends. And I will do this very roughly by going along this final seam here and just wrapping the yarn around some of the stitches, not even all of them, because later on this will be the inside of our work, and once I have made a few of them, I just cut it. And the same I will do with all of them. And one last final thing is now to turn it, because the other transition is a bit nicer, and then also we can hide the seams from the slip stitches, and your beautiful Santa mitten is done. Of course, it only makes sense when you have two of them. So make another one, and then just have so much fun with them. I think they fit absolutely beautiful, and of course they will stretch out a little bit sooner or later, but that's how it is. That's how working with yarn is. And how many of those will you make this year? I probably will make quite a few of them and make them as Christmas gifts, because I think everyone can need such super awesome and cool fingerless mittens, and they will also be very helpful for my daily walkies with Holly, especially when it's cold and rainy and windy like it is today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you will have fun making those absolutely fabulous fingerless mittens all in one go. I still can't believe it. And I hope to see you back again next time, only at the Totally Fierce Crochet channel. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of the future nonsense videos like this. Bye!